twin characters in Thomas are nothing new. They've been in the series since the Railway series and even all the way up to the reboots. Some of the most memorable characters are twins, like Bill and Ben or Max and Monty. In my opinion, they are some of the most entertaining characters from the show. However, the two twin engines that will be the stars of this custom showcase are Donald and Douglas. Donald and Douglas are some of the most recognizable engines in the fandom, and for good reason. They have a great character dynamic with the other engines in the series, and overall I'd say have the most interesting story arc of all the twin engines in the show. They're fun characters, and I really like them, even in the CGI series. Recently, it was revealed that Donald and Douglas would make their big return to the series with the next season of All Engines Go, and I kind of have mixed feelings on it. On one hand, I'm happy that the show writers haven't forgotten them and express interest in writing for them, but on the other hand, it's very clear that Mattel wants to get older fans to like the reboot by bringing back fan favorites like Duck, Toby, and now Donald and Douglas. Bringing back Donald and Douglas won't make the show better. Writing actual stories about the trains acting like trains, or stories that are intelligent, will though.
Who needs drugs?
You do? You're a train? Anyway, you didn't click on this video to watch me talk about the depressing state of the Thomas franchise, you came to see Trackmaster Customs. My name is Railway, and today we'll be taking a look at my Trackmaster Customs of Donald and Douglas, the Scottish engines. So there wasn't much I wanted to change with the Trackmaster Donald and Douglas. They are already very good Trackmaster engines with good detail and look like the characters from the show. The only thing I wanted to add was an extra wheel on the tenders, as it would look a whole lot better. I also was going to replace the decals on both engines, as they were either missing on them or were not in great condition. With the design in mind, I started work on the engines. To make these customs, I used the 2012 Mattel Trackmaster Donald and Douglas. The Donald was the same one I got all the way back in 2013. I got Douglas from a train show, and the tender from a thrift store. The tender is actually the Hit Toy Company one. First things first, I was going to have to clean both engines to remove any dirt and the original sticker details. Both engines and tenders were disassembled and cleaned. The motors were in good condition, so I left them as is. I decided to make some custom couplings for the back of the engines, as I don't really like how far apart they were. It's not very realistic. All I did was just cut a piece from the middle of the coupling and glue the two pieces together. This design was inspired by YouTuber Trackside Studios 06. I was worried that the coupling was not that sturdy, so I decided to add some plastic card to make it stronger. Once both engines were clean, I started to reassemble the chassis. I removed the paint on Donald's tender, as I had to remove the marker I added a long time ago. It's okay, because we'll be repainting the buffer beams anyway. Now, it's time to add those middle wheels on the tenders. I looked through my box of spare wheels and found the wheels from the Playrail Gordon and Henry. I thought they were the perfect size and decided to use them. I cut the top parts off and painted them. The Mattel versions of Donald and Douglas's tenders have these plastic wheels and axles, which I don't really like. Since the tender I was using for Douglas had metal axles, I wanted to add metal ones on Donald's tender too. I had some spare wheels and axles, and they fit perfectly. Once that was done, I test fitted the middle wheels on the tenders to see if they would work on both the radiuses of track on my layout. First test will be on the long curves, and then the second test will be on the short curves. So let's test out Donald first. And it works. Nice. And it is very, very close to the track. So I'm thinking I actually might need to make these a little bit shorter just because I don't want any interference between the tender and the rails here. And for Douglas, he works as well. And we'll test out the tenders on the short radius tracks. And yep, it works. Okay. So I'm actually very happy about that. On my layout, I do actually have this piece of track, which is a very tight turn right here, which I'd imagine would actually be pretty difficult for some engines. So I do just want to test out the tender. Ooh. Yeah. It is touching the side of the rail, so I might actually have to go in and make these a bit smaller. So, yeah. So I removed the wheels, sanded them down a bit, and tested them again. Test number 2 with the new tender wheels. First test will be on the long curves, second test will be on the short curves, and then the last test will be on this piece of track right here, which is a little hard to navigate for some characters. So here we have Donald. See how his tender goes. And it is very nice. No hookups or anything. All right, now let's test out the shorter radius curves. Wow, it's very nice, actually. Very nice. Okay, so that one was Donald, and we'll get Douglas. Yep, the same as Donald. Works. Perfect. Awesome. So, with the tenders complete, aside from the decals, I moved on to the engines. The Mattel versions of Donald and Douglas have the same face expression, unlike the Tomy ones. To differentiate the two engines, I gave them different eyebrows, and gave Donald a beauty mark, like his All Engines Go counterpart. The whistles and safety valves were repainted too. Next, I had to repaint the buffer beams. I masked off the parts of the engines I didn't want paint to go on, and painted them. The paint I used is Rust-Oleum's Apple Red. Once the paint dried, I painted the buffers and couplings. The Trackmaster, Donald, and Douglas never had painted handrails, so I decided to paint them myself with a silver marker. This was really tedious to do, but it came out really nice. For the cab windows on the engines, I used these little circle stickers that I painted and put on the front of the engine's cabs. I gave both the engines and tenders a clear coat to protect the paint and give them a nice matte finish, and once that dried, I reassembled the engines and their tenders. I made some brand new decals for Donald and Douglas, and I'm really happy with them as they look pretty close to the original sticker details. The new decals were cut out and glued onto the engines. I was going to keep the original sticker on Douglas's tender, however, I decided to just make a new one to be consistent with Donald. And with that, Donald and Douglas were complete, and we're onto the layout.